let's go over to something a lot more fun. Samoa Joe and Scott Steiner.
Fun in a bunch of different ways. A, match quality, but B, silliness. And what are we here for if not silliness?
Love a bit of silliness. May 18th, Impact. Samoa Joe's looking incredibly cool backstage. He's just staring down the camera. It's just a shot of Joe looking cool.
Joe just has a lot of cool shots.
Yeah, it's just like he is there and he's awesome. That's all you need to know about Samoa Joe right in this moment. JB has Abyss with the King of the Mountain competitors. They're all tense because they could be called at any moment, except Steiner, who is really mad at waiting. So he kicks the set and storms off into the distance shouting, "No, I'm not waiting!"
Steiner is so, he just wants to fight all the time.
Especially Sting. He just wants to fuck up Sting.
It's like, that's the whole reason I'm here.
I've been brought to this company with 2 jobs, watching Jeff's back and beating up Sting. And I really want to beat up Sting.
Someone give me Sting, goddammit.
So Steiner charges out to the ring. He wants Sting right now. Just like the segment later in the month, he starts choking poor Don West as Mike Tenay shouts, Scott, we have no control over this. Scott, stop. Samoa Joe's music hits, not because he's a diligent man wanting to save Don West.
Because it's his schedule. It's he's scheduled next.
Which, it's one of those like small little logic things that I appreciate. Like it's not that Joe is the babyface making the save, because we established at the pay-per-view he's not really a babyface. He didn't even save Sting from Jarrett and Steiner's attack at the pay-per-view. But he's wrestling Chase Stevens next. Chase Stevens was already in the ring as Steiner went on his rampage, so Chase Stevens is just standing there.
Chase Stevens look like an asshole. You just let it happen.
This entire month, the story is Chase Stevens looking like an asshole, to be fair, to set something up. So, storytelling that he's an already in the ring nerd.
But, well, I like that they do this bit with the thing rolling into the next thing, or like it being related in some way, but I do feel like they do it a lot.
They're experimenting with format a lot this month, because a bunch of Impacts open either, like the 4-way, we'll talk about the 4X division match on the next show, opens in progress with a lot of people in the ring. But yeah, they do try to do the old ECW thing, isn't it, where segments roll from one to the next. But like the reason they did it here is to find a way for Joe and Steiner to come face to face without Joe being like a babyface making the save.
Yeah.
Whereas he should make the save. It's Don West that's in trouble, Joe. Go save him.
Yeah, but he's kind of a dick.
So Joe and Steiner come face to face. Steiner flexes, says Joe's not man enough, as there's no physicality here, but there's a face off. Joe then very quickly beats Chase Stevens.
And then he just starts kicking him.
Yeah, it's like, I beat you really quickly with the coquina clutch, and then starts just kicking Chase Stevens. For Andy Douglas, who we haven't seen since Steiner took him out in March, he makes the save.
I just like that he started kicking the shit out of him.
We don't give a fuck about Chase Stevens. I've beaten you comprehensively, and I'm frustrated because I had to stare at Samoa Joe, or at Scott Steiner, so I'm going to kick you.
It's like a real dick about it.
It is really interesting that they don't want Samoa Joe to be a babyface.
Yeah, they're really fighting that. They want him to be cool.
Yeah, but not a babyface.
They don't want him to be a baby.
It's really interesting how they're definitely fighting the tide with that as well. And maybe they are smart to not just book him as good guy. Like, maybe he keeps some of his aura by still being a bit of a dick.
Yeah. I mean, that might be part of it. And well, maybe they just don't want to feel like they're restricted to having him fight babyface.
Yeah, maybe at this point they are like, we don't want to go all in on Joe at the moment, because clearly the direction is Jarrett and Sting. So we can't have Joe be full babyface, so we'll keep him a little in the tweener category for the time being until we want to push him into the babyface side. Whereas I would have just said, just go with Joe. Just go with them. Come on. I didn't give them their own color-coded category. We will mention them a lot in multiple segments.
They don't deserve one, to be fair.
There is a story running through the month that we'll talk about as it goes, as it pops up in different stories. But Shane Douglas watches on as the Naturals are consoling each other, I guess, after their ass got kicked by Samoa Joe.
Shane is looking at his son.
I wonder, is he like eyeballing? It's like, am I related?
Douglas to Douglas.
June 1st Impact. There's an interview with Samoa Joe. Sting was Joe's route to the main event, where Joe could match up with the big dogs, and he said he promised he would have Sting's back from bell to bell, and he delivered on that. And even though Sting got his ass kicked after the match, he owed him nothing after that. Talks about how everyone has always feared Scott Steiner, but he can't wait to go one-on-one with him, but he doesn't think Steiner will risk his reputation to go one-on-one with Joe.
It's a good line.
Yeah, I really like the idea that, like, it's not that Joe is like disrespecting Steiner, because he is like, you are cool and a badass, but I'm just not afraid of you. Everyone else is afraid of you, but I'm not afraid of you.
And you can't handle the fact that I'm not afraid of you.
Yeah, and that actually, we'll talk about it when I get to the match, but there's a fun way that plays into like the psychology of the match too, but we'll get to that in a second. So Steiner fails to qualify for King of the Mountain on June 8th. He gets disqualified against Sting. After that match, he grabs the mic and says he's not leaving, but once again, Samoa Joe is meant to be scheduled next. He's meant to be wrestling Chase and Rance. Steiner threatens to kill Chase and Rance for being there, not the other things. Joe's music hits, they go eye to eye, Steiner pie faces him twice, security and officials hit the ring to separate them, as Joe stands on the middle rope, staring over security, staring down Steiner, which is a great shot. So this is our first physicality since Sacrifices. We have a big pull-apart brawl between Joe and Steiner. JB is with Larry. He wants to see Joe versus Steiner. He's like, you're going to make that match, right? And this is where Larry is like, guys, come on.
Maybe, I don't know.
It turns out later in the show, the new face of TNA management is going to make the decision for Larry. He's going to usurp his authority and make the decision on the match later in the show. And Larry's like, you can't make a decision that fast.
It's crazy.
Then we get an iconic moment in TNA history to close out the June 8th Impact. Christy Hemme comes out, hands an envelope to Don West.
Oh, okay, before she does that,
Yeah.
her entrance for coming out to hand an envelope is to go to the ring, do the splits on the ring apron, and then go over and give them the envelope.
Christy's gotta hit her high spot.
It's just so funny that she comes to the ring, does the split, shakes her ass, and then goes, time to deliver the envelope out of the ring.
Because Christy has moved to a new role in this show where, like, Mike Tenay calls her the bumper girl at one point, which sounds rude for some reason. But, like, she is, like, between segments, she'll be like, oh, you know, King of the Mountain qualifier coming up later tonight. There'll be, like, a 15-minute interstitial of Christy Hemme, like, plugging what's coming up later tonight.
I actually like her in that role.
Yeah, it's a fun, again, a new little presentation thing that you don't see on other wrestling shows.
Yeah.
But yeah, she does do her full entrance. It reminds me of that time when Rhea Ripley is making the save in NXT and she does her full entrance.
Yeah.
Except this time it's much sillier because she is just delivering an envelope, but does her full entrance. So Don stands on a chair and he's like, guys, new announcement by the new face of TNA management, and they made it official. It will be Scott Steiner versus Samoa Joe at Slammiversary. And then, as we go off the air, Mike Tenay and Don West do a big, dramatic, lovely, wholesome high five at the announcement of this match for the pay-per-view.
And it wasn't Kurt Angle's debut.
No, it was. Someone tried to correct me. Which one? Me. Tried to correct me. How dare you? Me.
Just in general, not even about TNA.
I know, I'm never wrong.
Exactly.
Name one time I've been wrong.
Can't do it.
We are never wrong, we have never been wrong, and we never will be wrong. But also, to post that clip, I was watching the fucking show. I know exactly where it came from because I was watching it. Unlike all these engagement farm accounts that just go finding clips to post for engagement, I post clips from things I actually watch.
That's insane.
But yes, we do get the Mike Tenay Don West high five, and it's kind of forgotten. It kind of became a bad meme over time, where it would be like the Basham show up at the Impact Zone and people would post the high five. But I think we've reclaimed it. I think we've reclaimed the high five. But also, like, people forget, like, there is a reason they are celebrating that match being made. One, because it's fucking awesome, and these guys are awesome. But also, like, there's 2 segments this month where Don West is attacked by Scott Steiner. So, like, they are celebrating that match being made because Steiner is finally going to get his comeuppance for attacking Don West because he's going to face Samoa Joe. So, like, there is an actual reason that they're so enthusiastic about that. It's not just, oh, the match is made, yay. It's like, oh, yeah, that dude who, like, harassed and antagonized and terrorized us is finally going to get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
So the deep lore of the high five. And it's also just a very wholesome one.
It is. It's cool.
And it's very funny. If you look closely, Dory Funk Jr. sitting behind them.
He's also high-fiving. He's freaking out. He's into it.
Which I never noticed. And all the times I watched this, it's like, oh yeah, there's Dory Funk Jr. He's just sitting there in his cowboy hat. They do the big high five. Go home show. We get a fucking awesome Scott Steiner Samoa Joe video package. Like, this is, I think, all I ever want in wrestling. Because, as I said, no talk of good matches, no talk of demos, no talk of ratings.
You know what it is?
What?
It's like an old school UFC promo.
Yeah, but like, for all the times people are like, wrestling should take from the UFC, this is what they should have taken, and realistically, it's what they should have taken back from the UFC, because it's like, this is what the UFC took from wrestling, and then wrestling stopped doing, and it's what made UFC really popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, Joe is like, I am a walking war. There's a great line where it's like, I smash Nash, I smash Sting, I smash Triple H, and then they cut to Joe being like, I'm not a game, I'm a walking war, Scotty. It's like, oh, yes! And then, like, Joe is like, you're fat, you're a half-breed. Which face. Like, dude.
Yeah. He's like, you can't call yourself Samoan Joe.
Yeah, on the pay-per-view, he's like, you're sloppy Joe to me. He's like, you see this, Joe? This is a vein. Something you'll never have, you fat little bastard. And like, there's Steiner, he's like, he takes his glasses off. He's like, look into my eyes. Your heart isn't as cold as mine, and I'm going to beat you like a dog. That's just like,
Just get you amped up.
It does. And like, Joe is going like full, you bring your suplexes, you bring your wrestling, you bring your reputation, you bring your bad attitude. I don't care, because I am pro wrestling. I am Samoa Joe. And like, that's all I ever need for pro wrestling. These are two badass, charismatic dudes shit talking each other, and now they're gonna fight. Awesome. Maybe like the best video package this company's ever done.
It's really good.
So we do get promos from both Joe and Steiner on the pay-per-view. JB has Joe, says Steiner has never faced anybody but like Joe. He's not intimidated by Steiner. A lot of people go into Steiner matches being afraid of his short fuse, but he's going to stand there with a lighter. Says neither of them have had their shoulders pinned to the mat in TNA, and that changes tonight because he's going to take that from Scott Steiner. And then later in the show, JB has Steiner, and Steiner insists that Joe be called Sloppy Joe. He's beaten Goldberg, he's beaten Cena, he's beaten Batista, he's beaten Sting. Who is Joe beaten? All those guys in the X division means nothing. Says all the fat rednecks out there want Joe to beat Steiner because they see themselves in Joe. Even TNA management wants Joe to beat Steiner because they're trying to sell this new DVD, The Best of Samoa Joe Unstoppable. Throws the DVD down, stomps on it, and says more like unsellable. And Joe, tonight I'm gonna kill you.
Those are incorrect. It's very sellable, as we've heard.
It's the hottest selling DVD in TNA history. And then we get it. Samoa Joe versus Scott Steiner.
It's awesome. I was like kind of just thinking about it last night, like after we did the news. I was kind of just chilling there, and I was watching the highlights that we had on the Twitter, and I was like, man, what a kick-ass fucking match.
Yeah, because it's 13 minutes long, which is, I think, the exact length this match should have been. And it's just two big heavyweight bomb-throwing dudes throwing bombs.
It's fucking awesome. Head drops. Straight out of like a Champions Carnival Night 5.
Yes.
Didn't make the first round of tapings, but is on the second round.
I think I really appreciate it. It's a very small touch, but you see, the start of the match is Steiner out-wrestles Joe. Like, Steiner uses amateur wrestling background to out-wrestle Joe. And then Joe spits in his face, which gets Steiner fired up and throwing bombs, and that's where Joe starts to get an advantage, which, like, ties into all the stuff they did in the build-up, where he's like, not only is Joe not afraid of Steiner, he's identified Steiner's short fuse as the weakness. Like, that's the downside of Scott Steiner. Like, that's what he can actually exploit. If Steiner was, like, calm, composed, just wrestled him to the mat, he'd probably beat him. But he lures Steiner into losing his temper, and that's where Joe starts kicking his ass. And like, oh, you've even tied the story together. Good pro wrestlers.
Yeah, they are good pro wrestlers.
You got to appreciate, like, Steiner's working his ass off here. For as much as Steiner has left in the tank, he is giving it all here. Like, he's taking big bumps, he's throwing big suplexes. He does like a half and half suplex where he drops Joe on his head, and it's awesome. But like, he's taking like Blue Thunder bombs. He's taking like the full force of Samoa Joe's strikes. Like, Samoa Joe is not pulling his kicks. He's not pulling his chops. He's being Samoa Joe with Scott Steiner. He's not treating like the old broken man with kid gloves. He does like a Blue Thunder bomb at one point. So like, Steiner, for as much, he doesn't take the muscle buster. By all accounts, like, they didn't want him to tap out just because like Steiner's reputation, he probably shouldn't tap out. But they also, he wasn't comfortable taking the muscle buster because he's a broken, hollow old man. So, but he apparently had no problem whatsoever putting him over clean, but he ends up winning with the snap power slam because of that. But like, Steiner really, like, he came to work. He came to have a Samoa Joe match. He wasn't compromising Samoa Joe, you know?
He worked up to Joe's style.
And like, this is the thing I think we mentioned last month, when these guys like really respected and enjoyed working with Joe. Like, the thing they should have realized, and the thing that happened here, is like, Joe can give them their best, most interesting match in years and years and years.
Yeah, I think some of them do realize that.
Like, this is maybe the last like truly great match of Scott Steiner's career.
And yeah, you'd know better than me.
Certainly, like, he had some really good matches with P.D. Williams, of all people, who we'll get to those in 2008, 2009. But like, this is maybe Steiner's last great singles match, where he just goes out there with Joe and he just does all the shit you would expect him and Joe to do. And I think we were talking on the watch along about how like, this is like not your like, when you think top 5 Samoa Joe dream matches, Scott Steiner probably wouldn't be somebody that comes to mind. But like, in practice, it's like, oh, he's a perfect opponent for Samoa Joe.
It makes I think it's a perception thing. It's like, but it does. It makes total sense that you're like, oh yeah, Steiner Joe should be a dream match if you think about it.
Like the two things I think they really have in common is the thing we were mentioning for Steiner earlier is like they both feel real. Like you hear a Joe promo and you don't feel like that man is performing, and you hear a Scott Steiner promo and you definitely don't think that man is performing. And
you know he's not.
Yeah, and that's what makes these two really interesting to bounce off each other. That's what makes their that hype video so goddamn good, because it's two guys that you legitimately feel like want to kill each other. As I said, finish, Steiner had the Steiner recliner in, but Joe lifts him up to his shoulders. He dropped him on the ropes. He did kind of miss the ropes a little bit, and then pinned him after a snap power slam. So that was the finish, as Joe pins Scott Steiner clean in the middle of the ring in about 13 minutes. Hell of a match. Great feud. Even like going back to last month with all the stuff at Sacrifice, like the interactions with Joe and Steiner were really good there too. Like Steiner I don't think he could be a bigger success for his first like 3 months in TNA.
No, they kind of hit it out of the park.
And like he hasn't really beaten anybody. He's come in, he's been Scott Steiner, but he hasn't been like pinning everybody. I actually don't think he's pinned anybody. Which maybe you might say that's almost a critique. But he's come in, he's been like full aura Scott Steiner.
But he hasn't needed it, because it's like, you're right, it's just all aura and presentation.
And then you set him up to have Samoa Joe knock him down in like Samoa Joe's first major singles match outside the X division. This is him beating the former WCW World Champion. It's exactly how you should use a guy like Scott Steiner. You know, this is like the blueprint for when you get a guy like this. You bring him in, you make him credible, and you have your young guy beat him. Awesome match. If you've never seen it, it's 13 minutes of dudes throwing bombs and doing suplexes and falling on their head. It's so good.
You couldn't possibly want more.